Hi, good morning. Good morning. I see we have people from Naivasha, Nairobi, someone from Lamu. So we are quite spread out, and everybody is saying it's a good morning. So that's beautiful to hear from each and every one of you. I believe we have a good quorum at 87, 88, and rising, just to be able to start off this session and respect everybody's time. So perhaps we can mute ourselves, those who are joining us, so that we can respect whoever is on the mic at the moment. I want to appreciate everybody who has been able to create time and perhaps join this particular session. I believe it's going to be very impactful. The structure of it is it's in partnership with, yes, we have just started recording. Whoever has not muted, kindly mute yourself. So that we can, that's Stephen Washira, let's have it muted. Thank you. Then we'll have the structure of it all is going to be introductions, of course, from the side of IHRM, and then we'll also have introductions from the side of DOSH, just to be able to accommodate everybody. And then the bulk of it will be done by DOSH because they have the content and they're going to impact us with that content. And then eventually we'll have the session closed down after a Q&A session. So my name is Catherine Buru at IHRM, and I am the business development and also in charge of marketing. But the person who will be taking us through this opening session will be our executive director, who has honored us with her presence. And she might tell us where she is at the moment, and perhaps just have a few words, one or two, to be able to bless us this morning. So I think I would ask someone to open for us with a word of prayer, a volunteer. And then after that, we'll welcome Madam Kuresha. And then now I'll also introduce the individuals from the DOSH side. Anybody who would like to volunteer and start us off with a word of prayer? Just unmute yourself.
Let us pray.
Thank you,
Father
David.
God, we are thankful for this session that we have to learn. And we pray that God, you guide the facilitators and all of us so that it can be a productive engagement that will be of help to us and the organizations where we serve. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, David. We say amen and amen. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Madam Kuresha. You can unmute yourself and say hello to the 98 participants who are on for this particular session at the moment. Karibu sana, Madam Kuresha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today as we partner with members from DOSH to unpack for the HR professionals on the recently gazetted regulations around occupation safety and health. That is the first aid in workplace regulations. This is actually very significant. And as you are aware, when COVID came, all of us, we were at the Institute on now, how do we handle this? What do we do? And I'm so glad that DOSH has been proactive to come up with this policy regulation, which we must, as HR professionals, make sure that we understand it, because this is very crucial, and we play a very pivotal role as HR professionals in ensuring that culture of safety within our organizations is maintained. So please take note of that as you listen in. I will not go into the act, they're going to unpack it for us, but it's important that we understand our role. Most of the time, we mistake that when we have regulations in place, we have to fall back to them. You have to make sure you domesticate them in your workplaces, and that is your responsibility, that you now have to go back and update your policies. So you have to develop a policy around this issue so that it can reflect your organization commitment on work safety at workplace, because we don't want us to run to DOSH when we want to compensations and all that, but we have to make sure that we have assessed our workplaces. We are talking to the right individuals to do that for us. What are the procedures in place? And this now, once you put it in policy, from the regulation to organizational policies and the risk assessments, it's key that we also do that. But most importantly, that as what we are doing today with DOSH must be, you need to take notes and see how you can cascade this information within your organization, because you must ensure that all your employees understand what are the hazards in place. You must recognize where they are, and if any, what are the reporting procedures if there is any breach or if someone gets hurt in the process. And then above all, when regulations are gazetted within the government of Kenya, we must comply with it. So, and we cannot comply on something that we are not informed about. So that is why today's session is key, that as you go back to more than the 90 organizations you represent, that you will tell them this is a new area of regulation which was not there, and this is how we have to align it within our policy. And we should not forget our role as HRs is to bring the leadership commitment into this. We must engage our employees to make sure that they understand these safety initiatives, hold annual trainings for them to understand. And most of us think that safety issues are just on the industry where there is manufacturing and all that. Every workplace has its own hazard. As I welcome you and hand back to Catherine, please listen keenly, go back, implement. Most importantly, make sure that you have a memo out there that you updating your management, you updating your leadership, and you also update your policies. Let's remain committed as HR professionals to not only make our workplaces more conducive, but also have an inclusive workplace that is very compliant with the regulations of the country, and also the best practices. Because given that this is a very, very recent regulation, I am sure it has looked on all issues, the emerging issues. It's going to be something that can be replicated easily. So please pay attention, and let's do this collectively and for the well-being of our employees. Thank you so much, Madam Catherine. Back to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Madam Kuresha, for that wonderful introduction. She has already set the pace for this conversation, and it's only fair that I do not dilute what she has already done to set us off. So at this point, I will invite Dr. Memley, you're there? From the DOSH side to also introduce her team, Dr. Melanie, sorry, to introduce her team, who will be Moses and whoever else will be opening from your side. You're welcome to unmute and just kickstart the conversation after your introduction. So karibu sana, Dr. Melanie.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you very much to the whole of IHRM leadership and team. From DOSH on our end, this morning we have myself, who is going to do the presentation. We have Mr. Moses Mude, who is going to do moderation. And on behalf of the Secretary OSH, we have Mr. Justus Nyakego, who is going to give the opening remarks, and then we can proceed from there. Mr. Nyakego, karibu sana.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, all those that have tuned in, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Justus Nyakego. I am the Deputy Director, Occupational Safety and Health Services. On behalf of the Secretary, DOSH, I wish to welcome each and everyone in this conversation. And I want to point out that now we have a law which is quite current. We've been having rules that were dated back to 1977, which have now been taken over by the new rules. And These ones are now applicable and quite current to the current situation and emerging situations in workplaces. We are in the process of review of the main act, the mother act of the issues regarding occupational safety and health, as well as the Work Injury Benefits Act to become Work Injury Compensation Act, which will align themselves with the Constitution, and then we will have everything in place. But so far, the first aid regulations are now in place, and workplaces are urged as much as possible to ensure that they comply with those regulations that are in place. And these regulations are capable of addressing emerging issues that arise in workplaces currently. And remember, we have a new baby that is trending, the digitization, as well as artificial intelligence, which have also got to be addressed with the laws that we are reviewing. So I hope that these rules are quite applicable in those regard, and they will be able to address issues that arise in those platforms. So I don't want to talk much, but want to welcome my team, Dr. Melanie, as well as Mr. Moses Mude, as we go along. And I wish that we have very nice deliberations and very fruitful interactions. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Nyakego. My name is Moses Mude from the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health Services, part of the team that is here, that is aiding in the implementation of these new rules. And as it has been introduced, I don't want to go into details because we have a presentation in front of us, which should be presented by Dr. Melanie. I would prefer that we let her go through the whole presentation. And then at the end of it all, if we have any questions or concerns, we will handle them at the end of the presentation. Karibu Daktari.
Thank you very much, team. I will proceed with the presentation. We're going to take about 30-40 minutes of the presentation just to give an overview. Our title is on the first aid in the workplace regulations, and this is basically the new regulations which were gazetted last year in May 2024. And I'm going to give an overview and snippets of what you need to know as HR practitioners, because this is a field that you interact majorly very closely yourselves, but also in collaboration with the safety officers or the line managers or even the supervisors within your workplaces. Okay, so what is first aid and why then do we have these regulations? So first aid, the main thing is the immediate assistance provided to an individual suffering from an illness or injury until full medical treatment is available or a medical practitioner is able to attend to them. Why is first aid important in the workplace? In our lives, we spend a huge time of our day, close to about a third thereabouts, every day in the workplace. So therefore, anything can happen to us in the workplace. And when these things happen, injuries, accidents, it's important that one, life is preserved. Two, there's minimization of the injuries, of the consequences. And then finally, to promote recovery. So because of this, we've had a first aid regulation in place. The one that we had, the first one, was under the factories and other places of work rules, which was established in 1977. That's close to 47 years before we changed to what is current right now. The current one was changed to reflect the emerging practices in the workplace, but then also the emerging issues within the environment and the sector. For example, issues of HIV have been incorporated, issues of infection prevention control, looking, for example, into the situation like the pandemic, looking into things like climate change, looking into emerging technologies in the workplace. So these are some of the things that have been encompassed part in the rules and other documents that we've prepared. The citation for this regulation is First Aid in the Workplace, Legal Notice number 79 of 2024. Why this regulation and why is it important?
Two terms that are very important.
I may request if someone speaking, if you may kindly mute yourself. All right, the legal framework. So under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, one, it mandates all employers to provide first aid facilities. So this regulation is basically explaining to you as the employer what the first aid facilities are and what are the requirements. Secondly, what I've not included in this slide is the Work Injury Benefits Act. It requires employers to provide immediate medical aid and assistance for any person who gets injured in the workplace. So this regulation, while the Mother Act is OSHA, it also supports what is in the Work Injury Benefits Act. The regulation provides all the details and we'll go into them. So the first thing that we look at is the duty of care. And under the duty of care, we have the employer responsibilities and we have the worker responsibilities. Under the employer responsibilities of providing first aid facilities, on this we look at a couple of things. There is the first aid room, there's the first aid kit, the first aid box, and such kind parameters. So these are the kind of facilities that then we enumerate further what must you provide in this. What is a first aid kit? What is the color? What is the size? What are the things that should be inside? Next, it looks at how we appoint first aiders. How do you designate a first aider? How do you ensure they are well trained? How do you ensure they are up to date so that then you meet the requirements of this regulation? Next, we look at the training requirements. On this, it talks about who is supposed to do the first aid, when is it done, what is a valid certificate, what must they comply when they're doing their training requirements. Is it a 10-hour course? Is it how many hours, and what should be in that training curriculum? Next, that is new in this regulation is the first aid audit, which is basically an audit to check that you're in compliance with this regulation and the Mother Act. Next, we look at the first aid kit requirements. If you compare this regulation and the previous one was a bit abridged in terms of the requirements. On this new regulations, we've expounded the requirements, but also in keeping with the number of people in the workplace, such that once you've done your risk assessment, you've looked at the number of persons that you have in the workplace, then you're able to stock your first aid kit to meet those requirements. If it is 0 to 10 people, then you need a certain size of the kit and certain number of consumables in that kit. If you have over 500 people in that workplace, then you're looking at a first aid room. But even if you have multiple first aid kits, then what is required in this? This was important because we realized the size and different workplaces then have different requirements based on their risk assessment. So this gives the minimal requirements that is required. New things that have been included in this includes the hemostatic gauze. Previously, we've used just sterile gauzes to try and prevent issues like bleeding, but now we're introducing a new thing, a hemostatic gauze, which is in best practice of what is happening worldwide. Next, we look at this content. After you bought them, where do you buy them? What are the standards? Is any gauze just similar that you can put it in the kit? No. We require that as you purchase your kits, as you restock them, then you ensure that the equipment and the consumables that you're buying comply as per the Standards Act. And this is basically the requirement that is under KEBS. In this kit, we do not consider medicines to be included, and this is in keeping with the current practices globally. Previously, we've had people keep pain medication. Others used to keep aspirin as before, but this has been discouraged. So in keeping with the regulations under the Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, and even other relevant bodies, then this has been excluded. The training and certifications, this has also been expounded further. talking about who are these DOSH approved institutions, what are the things that they must present to you so that then they're able to do the training for you. In terms of the numbers of first aid as required in a place, we take into consideration the number of people in that workplace. And this is only for those who are employed or the contractor. So this doesn't take into consideration if, let's say, it's members of the public. So specifically when you're talking and looking at the number of first aiders, then these are the as what's been enumerated. For example, between 21 to 50, at least on a minimum 3 first aiders during the working hours. If it is more than 100 workers, then what do we expect? And you'll find this will be quite different, for example, when you're in the office versus, let's say, somebody who's in a manufacturing sector, who, let's say, is in the EPZ. So you look, it's quite variable. If, let's say, you're in the quarry and mining, so this is quite variable in terms of the number of first aiders. Next is the first aid room requirements. So if you have more than 500 workers, you're required to have a first aid room. So this is has also specified the things that we want in that first aid room. It also gives a bit of the specifications. For instance, the entryway to that first aid room should enable a stretcher to go in and out. So that is on a minimum requirement. So this is just to ensure, because looking at the numbers and looking at really what capabilities then you're able to achieve. This one has expanded a few things. For example, you have the BP machine, the stethoscope, thermometer, among other additional first aid materials. It also talks of issues like the PowerPoints, the examination couch, and this is in keeping just in case there are any danger situations where we need to do CPR, where there are instructions that can be given. And especially when you have more than 500 workers, there are cases where you can have mass casualties. So this is in keeping to ensure that then we're able to meet the 3 requirements of preserving life and also preventing further injury. There is also a record book, and we'll talk a little bit more about this based on the schedule that we've attached in this regulation to ensure that as first aid is administered, then this is also documented. Next, we look at the duties of the first aiders. And on this, we basically listed some of the duties just to guide first aiders on the scope of work that they're able to do. Remember, a first aider is not a doctor or a clinician or a nurse in most cases. In some cases, it can actually be these healthcare practitioners who are designated to be first aiders. But in such a case, what are the minimum things that we require of a person? One is to provide prompt response in medical emergencies, to administer appropriate first aid, and also arrange for further medical care if necessary. And these are some of the things that we expect them to be trained when they are doing their first aid training. All this has been captured in the curriculum. To maintain the records of all injuries and treatments, very, very important to yourselves as the workplaces, but then also for us in DOSH, because one, we are able to track what injuries are these that are happening in your workplace, what is going on, what is the risk assessment to ensure we are not getting further injuries. If there are issues of workers' compensation, then these records become very important, because if you're having repeated injuries, what then becomes the consequence? If you have a worker getting a repeated injury, let's say on a finger, then later on the finger becomes deformed. What is the contributory to this? So records then have been emphasized a lot in this regulation. And this is something that yourself, you should take note, because when it comes to compliance, when it comes to legal issues, it is the records we'll be looking at. You should ensure the first aid kits are adequately stocked. We're not asking you to buy first aid kits every year, but we are saying as you complete the consumables, as you stay without using these first aid kits, ensure things are not expired, but ensure they are fully stocked all throughout. Implementation of infection control measures. This has also been very clear, because first aiders play a very important role in case there's, let's say, a mass casualty event or something that has happened. And they will be able to prevent not just in the workplace, but even further in the community, as then the other duty practitioners in the public health department take over. I'll talk a little bit about the first aid audits. So after you've met some of these requirements, what are these then that need to be checked periodically? We want you to do a first aid audit, and the report will be submitted to DOSH. There's a code of practice that has been developed in line of this, still under review. Basically, it will be looking at, have you complied to the regulations and to what extent, what is missing, what is the data that you have, what are the records that you've kept, and we'll be able to monitor and see these injuries that are occurring, to what end are then impacting the number of people or the level of compensation that we are also receiving in the work in our offices in DOSH. In terms of compliance and penalties, this regulation is still in keeping with the Mother Act. So of course, if you do not comply in terms of having first aiders in your workplace, training them adequately, and training is really important, because if your first aider is not well trained, then sometimes it could be yourself who actually needs that assistance, and the first aider is not able to administer or support. When we have our DOSH or even other labor inspectors come in the workplace, these are some of the things that they'll be looking at. The stocking of the first aid kit, is it adequate? Are there trained persons? When were they last trained? Are people aware that these first aid persons are in this workplace? Are they present such that at any working time, there's actually somebody who's able to administer first aid? Any consequences for non-compliance with this will be in keeping with the penalties that have been prescribed in the Mother Act and other legal instruments. In this regulation, we have two schedules. One is the first aid records form. It's called DOSH Form 33. On this first aid record form, it is a requirement that for any injury that requires first aid must be recorded here. So for example, if you get a needle prick that did not require you to undergo first aid, stopping bleeding and whatnot, then I don't require all the details in this first aid records form. However, if I got somebody who had a cut, if I got somebody who got a fracture in the workplace, I had an issue of fainting, and any form of first aid was done, then this first aid records form should be filled. What is in this form? There is a bit of biodata. There is also a bit of details on what happened, the circumstances, the first aid form that was administered, and then what then happened, the consequences. Was the person okay after? Did they have to be referred to a healthcare facility? This is important for us because as we continue following and in our mandate to ensure safety, to minimize injuries and to ensure zero fatalities, it is by looking at the small injuries and the things that are happening in the workplace for us to be able to, prepare more policies, more regulations, but even more importantly, to be able to respond directly with the workplaces and support the workplaces so that more people are not getting injured and we're not getting losses. The second schedule that we have is the minimum number of items in the first aid box. In this case, the minimum number of items in the first aid box is required both for the room and for the first aid box or kit. While we use the semantics first aid box, it does not necessarily mean it has to be the box itself. Nowadays, we are seeing first aid bags. We are seeing portable formats in big, in small levels. For as long as the minimum quantities it has is what is prescribed in the second schedule, it can be more based on the risk assessment that is done in the workplace. And we're encouraging workplaces to do their own continuous risk assessment. But even as your auditors come by and they do the risk assessment, it's important for you to look at then what is required here. For instance, a workplace, let's say a manufacturing place that has probabilities of having more cuts, then I expect you to have stocked more gauzes and less of other items. However, you've met the minimum, but over and above, then you're able to stock the rest. This minimum number of items in the first aid box will also be guided by the first aid records form, because from the records form, you'll be able to know the pattern of injuries, the pattern of accidents that is happening, and you'll be able to address this broadly based on the requirements of the Mother Act in terms of dealing with the hazards and the risks in the workplace. In keeping with the preparation of these first aid regulations, we have gone further to draft a code of practice for the first aid at work audit. So in terms of the audits, who's going to audit, when will it be audited? What is the who is going to audit, when is it audited, what is required in this audit report. So these are some of the things that we have prepared to be able to guide yourselves as workplaces, but also the auditors as they come around to your different workplaces. Next is the curriculum of first aid at work training. We have developed a curriculum. We had a previous one that was a lot shallow, but in keeping with the trends at that time. The current curriculum is much more expanded. It still has 30 contact hours, so that is about 4.5 days. If you include the breaks and the preliminaries and all that. It has captured from the basics that we expect in terms of minimal things like bleeding, but then it has even gone further to require that in some specific workplaces, you may be required to train people on AED use. You may be required to train persons on emerging issues that can be there in the workplace. We have captured issues of psychological first aid in this. We have captured issues of emerging technologies. For instance, we know equipment used in first aid has now changed. So in workplaces where they have specialized equipment or where they are required to be able to keep in keeping with international standards. So we have included this. There is mandatory sections that must be trained to all first aiders across board. And then there are other additional items that is good to train on. And we've included all this. And this is in keeping with the change in the world of work about what is happening in the workplace. We have a lot of remote work. We have a lot of lone working. We have emerging risks, for example, the nanomaterials. We have issues of radiation. So we've looked at really broadly all these emerging issues. How do we capture them specifically, but also how do we capture them broadly? When we'll be doing our inspection as OSH and labor officers, one of the things we'll be looking at is the number of training hours. And furthermore, part of this training will now be administered through our occupational safety and health management information system. So we'll be able to track what exactly is being trained to the workplaces, and is it the correct information? Are they getting what is required? Is it up to date? So these are some of the things that then you expect to start being asked by our labor officers when they come to your workplace in terms of the details of all this. Both the curricula, the code of practice, and will be circulated as soon as we have the final copies. The regulation is available online. So just in summary about what we have done in this regulation and what you need to, why is it new and why was it important for you to know? We've given a bit of interpretations to give a little bit more clarity in terms of really what first aid is in the workplace. We provide more clarity in terms of the occupier and the persons administering first aid. The other duties of care are spelled out in the Mother Act. So that is the duties of the employer in terms of the overall compliance of OSHA and the duties of the employee. So that means the duties like complying as per regulation set in the national laws, but then also in the workplace policies. For example, we expect an employee, if they are injured and they are required to be administered for first aid, we expect them to comply. Issues of data protection and all that is already implied in the Mother Act. So all these things are already in keeping. So we did not redo, but this being an interpretation of the OSHA Mother Act, it is already carried out. Training of persons administering first aid. This gives their duties. It has spelled out the curricula. What must they be trained on? When should they be trained? What is the frequency? When they should be trained after risk assessment has been done in the workplace, so that then they are trained on the relevant material that they need. The number of first aiders, very important. So these are some of the key things that we'll be checking. We would not want to come to a workplace where you have 1,000 staff, whether contracted or you're direct hire, and you have one first aider on duty. That will not work. What we've prescribed is a minimum number. You may go over and above and have even additional more first aiders. That is okay. The minimum contents of the first aid kit has been revised as well. This is based on the numbers of the workplace. However, we've put the disclaimer of a risk assessment has to accompany what you stock as the content of your first aid kit. So based on your sector of economy, based on the work that you do, based on the engagements, based on maybe even when the operations are higher. So like in some workplaces, there are times when you may experience more injuries because that is when you are in the active phase of duties and all that. This first aid regulations covers you in the workplace, covers all the definition of what a workplace is. So if it is a vehicle, it is covered. If it is a vessel, it is covered. If you are going out for things that are relating to the workplace, let's say you've gone for sports, you've gone for training, these are some of the things that are covered. So this is important for you to take note, even as you're engaging, let's say your contractors, your subcontractors. If you're going to different workplaces, these are things that are expected. It also really lines with what we expect in the emergency and evacuation procedures. So this is just one of the aspects that you should ensure that is captured. So in conclusion, this is an updated regulation. It is not a new regulation. We've pretty much just updated what was there, albeit old as it was. We have improved on what was there to ensure that the minimum requirements we have for you is in keeping with best practices, in keeping with international practices, but also to ensure that then it's also not causing much of a strain in terms of compliance. The action points that we need each of your workplaces to do, first and most importantly, just read through these regulations. Whatever I've presented this morning is really an abridged version of what is in the regulation, a snippet of what is in the regulation. In each of these subtopics, there are details that then is spelled out in the regulation. So assess your workplace first aid needs. So this is the risk assessment. Look at where you are. Do you even have a first aid kit? Do you have a trained first aid person? If not, start from there. Look at the risks that are there. Appoint and train the required number of first aiders. We've given a general guidance, but minimum guidance. Ensure the first aid facilities and kits meet the prescribed standards. So you're looking at in terms of the size, the number of items that you have based on your workplace number. Stock your first aid kit as per the schedule. So we insist on this. The requirements we've put there are actually very minimal, and it covers various range of hazards and risks that can appear in any workplace. Can you get a cut in any workplace? Probably. Can you get a few people fainting in any workplace? Probably. So these are the minimum requirements that we've put. I will end there for this presentation, and we will proceed to the Q&A session, where we'll be moderated with my colleague, Mr. Moses Mude. I think you can share your questions on, I don't know if they're on chat. If not, Catherine, you may guide if we may have people unmute and ask their questions, then we will record the number of questions and then respond at intervals. Thank you very much. I will end there for now.
Thank you for the good presentation. I think it was quite brief and given us an insight of what we were for. When we started the presentation, I requested that if you have any questions, you can post them on the chats, and I can see a good number of us have done it. So I think we can start with them. I'm going to read them out. Dr. You assist me in answering some of them I'll answer. The first question that was sent by Dennis Kuru is there a list of DOSH approved auditors for the first aid audit as mentioned, or who gets to do this audit? Can you elaborate? We have approved persons for audit, but for the first aid auditors, this is the first time we are doing it, and we are planning to do it as we approve the other auditors. So for now, we don't have, but it is something we have planned. It's already in line that when we call out for other approved persons, trainers, OSH auditors, fire auditors, the list of the approved auditors will also be called upon to the secretary. The other question, please let me know, this is Miriam, please let me know what are in these compliance issues. Having a first aid room in a first aid setup, in a hospital setup. Somebody else had asked the same question. I will request the to answer that together with a related question. But as I continue, Ian is the same question. Elaborate how to align this compliance with first aid rules in a hospital setup. Then another is asking for the documents, and the documents will be sent through your representative. If I may go on, the other questions. We have a link to the register of participation. This it's not about a link. I think it's for the webinar. It is not relevant for now. What are the criteria and qualifications required for approving first aid auditors? We have a draft of criteria whereby we have we have given the qualifications of who to be approved as a first aid auditor, and when we call for applicants, that will be clearly set out. So I think Dr. you can answer the question of aligning the first aid rules, especially the issue of the first aid room in a hospital setup. What input do you give?
Thank you, Mr. Mode. I've also been able to skim through some of the questions. Yes, a hospital setup is a workplace like any other. However, it is a unique workplace. And on this, let me not just say a hospital only. Some healthcare institutions are unique. Why? Because one, they are practicing part of what a first aid is required to do, to preserve life, to minimize, further consequences, and to ensure there is medical treatment there. So do we need people responsible for first aid in a hospital? The answer is yes. Often what you will find in a hospital is an emergency response team who will equally serve as really the persons responsible for first aid. And what happens in this case? Any injury or anything can happen to a person who is in the hospital or in the healthcare setup. And they will also need to go through the same support. What will happen let's say in a hospital setup is the other things that you're trying to preserve and whatnot will really be blurred because you're already in the hospital. The medical practitioners are there and can act immediately. Do we require you to have the first aid kit and a few other things? Yes, but the question would be to what extent? So you find in healthcare institutions, the emergency response team usually have a kit that they use. When there's an emergency, then they know where to access and how to access it. So in such a case, maybe the room that is used for resuscitation, maybe when you go for field activities outside the hospital setup, then you're required to have some of those first aid kits. You have your own ambulances, which are fully kitted. So we'll not say the ambulance requires an additional first aid kit, but it requires a minimum of these requirements. For as long as they're able to demonstrate that these things are easily accessible when a worker gets injured or when persons who are legally present in that workplace, then that's okay. Sometimes even healthcare facilities subcontract some of the things. It's other than their core mandate. You have contractors, you have people doing construction, you have people doing support services. How can they get access immediately to all these things that can preserve life, can ensure they are not getting further injuries? So for as long as that can be demonstrated in a manner that is documented in keeping with the special nature of these workplaces, it is okay. There are other healthcare institutions, for example, research institutions. We expect them to comply as this. The thing is, the minimum requirements provided in these regulations is basically the minimum. For as long as you can demonstrate that these things have been met in this manner, it is okay. And if I may expound a little bit further, there are other special industries, for example, those who work in aviation sector, those who work in, let's say, the marine sector. If you look at the kind of first aid equipment or kits that we expect them to have, is over and above this. And this is in keeping of the nature of work that they do. There are those sectors that, let's say, work with chemicals and whatnot. If you look at the standards that they will be required based on the risk assessment, will be much more than what we've prescribed in this regulation as the minimum requirements. So now I will go back and reiterate, do a risk assessment, look at, have you met the requirements that will do the three things that the principles of first aid require? And then finally, have you met what is required in the schedule? The records, even in a hospital, if there's an issue that requires attention of a worker, it must be recorded in the first aid record form or the accident register. The minimum requirements must be there, and we ensure that they are easily accessible. I have also seen a second question that relates to hepatitis B injection. The question was, how will we be able to check? When persons get hepatitis B, you get a hepatitis B vaccination certificate, which is usually given after you've completed your doses. And then there is usually one that you check periodically to look at the titers for the hepatitis B. So those are the things that we'll be able to check. And then another question in terms of medication, if medication is not allowed in the first aid kit, does it mean medication should not be there in the workplace? No. In the first aid kit, this is the responsibility of the employer. So no medication in that. Are there persons who are in the workplace who may need medicines? Yes. Can they keep it for themselves? Yes. Can they inform the first aider that these are medicines I usually take? Let me give an example. Somebody who has epilepsy, someone who has diabetes, someone who has any other special condition, that asthma, that they can get into an attack. There are protocols in terms of how first aiders are guided to support the person to take the medicine, but they are not stocking the medicine and they are not the one giving the medicine. So if that medicine is there, they can take instructions from a medical practitioner when an emergency occurs, and that they are guided how to take the medication. I hope that provides clarity. Over back to you, Mr. Mode.
Quite a number of questions, and the first one that I've seen going around a lot. You're asking about the issue of registration of the first aid auditors. As I've said, we are in the process of aligning the criteria of registration of first aid auditors. We are also waiting for the advert to be able to call out the first aid auditors. But just to give you a preview of what we have proposed, the qualifications, one, you either have a degree in medicine, nursing, or clinical medicine, a valid practicing license issued by the relevant regulatory body, a diploma in nursing or clinical medicine with a valid practicing license issued by the relevant regulatory body, a minimum of O-level certificate and a diploma in emergency, or a minimum of O-level certificate and a diploma in emergency medical practitioner, lasting at least 10 months from a recognized institution. Qualification apart from the above is proven basic skills. You should demonstrate knowledge and ability in conducting first aid. It's minimum of 5 years of proven practical experience in the field of first aid work, pursuant to provision of OSHA 2007. From that presentation, you can see, even if you're not a medical person, if you do an EMT course lasting less than lasting at least 10 months, you are qualified to, you can be approved as a first aid data. If I may go to the other questions. I think you have heard of most of them. Let me see the others. Where can we get the first aid record form? The first aid record form, I believe, is a form where you record the incidences at the workplace. In the rules, you get that we have a draft form, but this is the same form that is filed in our general registers. For those who have been using our general registers, it's the same documentation that is required there. So as long as you have a general register, that can be recorded there. The criteria are access to LMS free, who captures the time spent in LMS, first aid trainer, first aider or trainer. I'm not sure about what it means. If I may go to the other questions, question of the hospital setup has been answered well by Dr. Melanie. If I may go to the other charts on the questions, trying to look at these. How can I access the updated regulations? We have said we are going to post them. I am not seeing any other. What are the penalties for non-compliance? These penalties are general penalties as prescribed by the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Remember, these regulations are regulations done under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. So the penalties are prescribed in the Act as general penalties. Now, we may go on. The regulations, the provisions for first aiders to undertake hepatitis B injections. What the DOSH officers check in compliance with this? We will check whether there is proof of that being done. Whenever you get a vaccination, you get proof of that vaccination. That's what we check. I think the requirement of the first aid audit have answered that. Are you starting the first aid audit? We are starting the first aid audit. Immediately we have registered the auditors. As Dr. said, we already have a code of practice. Immediately the auditors are registered, they will start doing the first aid audits. I'm looking at the other questions that were written. Which is the best institution to conduct first aid training? If you look at our website, we have registered quite a number of first aid trainers. So it's your own prerogative to check which first aid trainer you are comfortable with, and they'll be able to give you first aid training. It is deemed that once they are registered, they have the right trainers, they have the right expertise to carry out first aid training. So we cannot tell you the best institution. It is you to look at our website, look at the portfolio, and be able to choose an appropriate first aid trainer for yourself. Nature of medication, I think that I has said. So the hospital setup. Then does it mean that we can hold the audits until DOSH shares a list of the approved first aid auditors? Right now, it's not even about host or holding, because we have not actually started doing them by the virtue of we have not registered the auditors. All right. Is a first aid auditor, is a first aider a designated person, or if you train the team, do they all count as first aiders? Well, a first aider is not a real designated person. It's part of the workforce, whereby you select a few members to become first aiders. If you're able to train the entire workforce, if it's practical, they're better. But we always say it's good to have first aiders who have been selected, who have undergone the training, and they are known by the other workers to offer first aid. Somebody is asking, could you provide a list of approved first aid training institution? I have answered that, whereby I've told you go to our website, you get a list of all the approved persons, not even just first aid auditors. Okay. And elaborate more on compliance of first aid rules in hospital center. That one has been answered. I think most of the questions that are on the chat have been answered, and I want to open the floor for anybody else who has questions to ask at this juncture.
Hello, can I go first?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a few questions, and one of the questions is apparently I joined in the meeting late, but I have this question. I've heard Molim say talk of tailoring our needs based on the risk assessment we conduct. So my question is this risk assessment going to be done by maybe the OSH committee members, or are we going to wait for for the auditors to come so that we can do the risk assessment. The second question is on hepatitis B vaccine. This is something we believe from the medical school, that's something that's supposed to be voluntary. So how am I going to persuade these people or really push them to having this, not that I fear for non-conformity? The third question I have is my first aid will be tailored to about 10 to 50 workers. I'm allowed to, or from the listing that I saw from the new laws, they said that I should be having an antiseptic solution of about 3 liters. Each and every first aid kit or generally? So I'll be having more like 19 first aid kits. My question is, am I supposed to have the 3 liters per each and every first aid kit, or am I supposed to have the 3 liters in my facility that are well distributed? Because telling me about 3 liters to each and every first aid box, and there are a number of things that I'm also seeing stipulated, it's looking a little bit not okay. The other question I am having, it's about they're telling us, or the law says, medicines are not supposed to be in the first aid box. Yet we are already having a number of things here in the list which are medicines. For instance, the antiseptic solutions to begin with. Number 2, they're talking of hemostatic gauzes. Number 3, they are telling us of eye drops. And actually on these eye drops, it is lubricating eye drops. Actually, they should explain to us what type of lubricating eye drops do they need us to install in our first aid boxes. And here they talk of 250 ml of eye drops. Is this normal irrigating, normal saline, or what type of drops are you taking? Because, for instance, we talk about a drug called Probetain, commonly used. That drug is only 15 ml. Now they're telling us about 250 ml. How many of what exactly drug should I be using? And for those workplaces, for instance, that handle chemicals, we usually have eye wash stations which offer emergency services. So when I'm told now to have 250 eye drops, 250 ml of eye drop solution, am I being asked to disregard?
Thank you for your questions. I think Dr. you can handle them. One of them, the first, yes, sir?
Sorry?
I couldn't the last few minutes. I don't know.
You're through with your questions?
Yeah, it's okay. She can answer that first.
Maybe to give you a brief, Daktari, he's asking about the risk assessment, tailoring your needs according to the basic risk assessment.
Okay, thank
vaccination
you.
should be voluntary. Okay, Doctor, take it up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kenya, for your questions, and you've touched on a couple of things. I'll start with number 1, risk assessment. Who does a risk assessment? It is the responsibility of the employer to do a continuous risk assessment. A risk assessment is not a one-stop thing. It is a dynamic thing that you do every single day. Or as in periodically, let me not say every single day. So the risk assessment can be done, yes, by the responsible persons assigned to maybe different tasks that is being done. For example, if you're going for a field activity, who will do the risk assessment there? We expect the person in charge of that activity to look into that. There's the risk assessment that is done by the auditors. This one is usually comprehensive and looks at many more things. It's almost like an audit. But your usual routinely risk assessment is what you do yourself. There's what we have that is a self-assessment that you do it yourself, and you can always discuss with either your auditor or even the safety committee. If they are well-trained, then they should be able to enumerate the risks. Some of these risks emerge even after you've done the audit. New risks emerge every day in the workplace. It's just for you to be able to enumerate and see then what needs to be addressed. And while answering this question of risk assessment, I'll go to your question about eyewash and the chemical industries. Like we said, these regulations prescribe the minimum requirements. However, we've given the disclaimer that you must do a risk assessment to look at what is required over and above in special and specific industries. So in the chemical industry, do I require you to keep a first aid kit like this one? Yes. Do I require you to keep your eye wash? Yes. Because when you look at the capabilities of what an eye wash is required, and in places where eyewash is not required is very different. For example, medical laboratory, most of them have the eyewash. When you look at, there's a different classification of the different laboratories based on different laws, and this is based on the work that they do in these laboratories. So they comply with these other things, but they meet the minimum requirements. I will talk about the eyewash and about your comment on medication. When you look at this, what you've listed as medication, hemostatic gauze is not a medication. I can provide the clarification from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board about what a hemostatic gauze is. It is not classified as a medication, not here in Kenya, not elsewhere. When you look at what we ask as the sterile eye drops, this is the saline drops. 250 ml is actually minimal. And on this, we're looking at normal saline drops. So this is basic requirement. When we talk of the other eye drops, like you've mentioned, Probeta N, this one is actually medication. It usually has an antibiotic, it has a steroid. We do not recommend that. However, when we talk of the risk assessment, there are industries who handle chemicals that they have a material safety data sheet that gives requirements that when exposed to this kind of thing, this is what you need, 1, 2, 3. So in such a case, then we expect you to comply as per what your safety data sheet says. Because this regulation, we've developed it last year. Between last year and this year, there are several other chemicals that have come into the industry. So we do not interpret the regulation alone. You've talked about the antiseptic solution. This is not something that is administered as an injection, so it is required because it is used to help ensure sterilization and not provide treatment. Hence the reason it is on the list. Let me see what else. You talked about the hepatitis B vaccination. The reason we've put it here is in keeping with exposure to biological hazards of a first aider. Remember, a first aider is not working as a healthcare practitioner. And on this, I'm excluding persons who are working in health facilities. So when we have a first aider, this first aider, the first thing in first aid is what? Is to ensure that you're safe before you start taking care of other people. So if we have a first aider who is declining hepatitis B vaccination or whatever is relevant, because in some industries, they may actually be required to even have over and above what we've prescribed as a minimum, then in such a case, I would prefer to either exclude, because looking at the obligations that then come when this person is exposed, how can somebody get hepatitis B? They get hepatitis B through fluids most of the time. This is what a first aider can be exposed to if they're expected to attend to a person who has injuries and they're exposed to body fluids. From medical school, I know as students go to clinical areas of practice, all cadres, so doctors, nurses, clinical officers, all that, are required to actually have hepatitis B vaccination. This requirement is guided by the National Infection Prevention Control Guidelines under the Ministry of Health. It has given all the directions, hepatitis B, TB, all kinds of infectious diseases that people can be exposed to, and what is required for those workers who are continuously exposed to various biological hazards. Whatever we've given here is a minimum requirement. If a person declines, just like in other rules, decline in writing and let that be put in record, in keeping with the knowledge of all the risks that is required. Something else, I don't know if there's another question that I saw. If you have more than 500 workers, but you contracted an emergency management, I think, response team, yes, we require you to keep an emergency room, because unless these persons that you've contracted actually are there stationed 24 hours, because the whole purpose of first aid is to be able to act immediately, whether it is you offering the service or the person you've contracted. But we require you to have one first aiders in that place. We require you to have the minimum requirements of these things. If you bring somebody on board to be in your workplace to administer that, to be present fully and all that, we require documentation for that and to actually show the subcontractor responsibilities that you've given to that person. When you go to the Mother Act, all obligations as per the OSHA Act lies to the occupier or to the workplace. So the issues of subcontracting and what then has to be are clear, the contractor policy and all that. So yes, we require you to have all that. All the other arrangements in or relevant for as long as it meets the minimum. I think I've covered at least, or someone else asked, do we record all accidents in the workplace? Yes, we do, but we do not report all accidents in the workplace to DOSH. The reason why you record all accidents is one, to look at near misses and look at the trends in your workplace. And this will also be able to help you as you're dealing with your own risk assessments. So that is the importance of why you have to record and keep, so that then you're able to see the trends. For example, in, let's say, a factory that does embroidery and all that, you can have several needle prick. Maybe the issue is a machine problem. And that is what you will be able to fix after seeing 50 people are getting, you know. So really, you record it, yes, for your purpose, but not all of it is reported to the office. What is reported is as per the Mother Act and also WIBA. I hope I've covered a huge, most of the questions. If there's anything that will be pending, let's hear from someone else, and then I'll be able to respond. Over to you, Mr. Mode.
Thank you, Dr. I think you have covered most of those questions. And I like your statement that these are minimum requirements. If you're able to go over above the regulations, the better. A good example, if you think you need 4 first aiders instead of 3, minimum requirements apply. So you can do even more first aiders. So for those questions that I'm looking at very specific, I'm seeing so specific questions asking if you have 70, if you have what, just know that our regulations prescribe minimum requirements. So in case you want to add more, it is you're not stopped by the law to do that. So I want to take the next set of questions, and I open the floor for that. Any other questions? So I think from silence means that we have gotten, I mean, we've almost exhausted what you would have asked. And I take it back to the IHRN team to conclude this as we close it.
All right, thank you very much, Moses and Melanie, for that impactful session. I was wondering whether we'll still have the panel session, or this has covered the entire presentation. Maybe Dr. Melanie, you can guide us on that, and then we see how best to conclude.
No, Catherine, this has covered what we wanted to explain and just give an overview of the regulation today. So yeah, we may proceed to the next step.
All right, thank you very much. I think majority I also see are asking for the registration form, which I'm going to be sharing just before we wind up. It has been very interactive on the chats with the questions. I believe a lot has been covered, and they still need for more information. And I want to believe that you are accessible, Dr. Melanie and Moses, for more conversations, perhaps just tailored to specific organizations that are maybe within this call. We are almost 313 people on this call. So that means that perhaps they need more elaborative conversations that can be, I believe, even done through in-house trainings in partnership with IHRM, where we can be able to give more guidance depending on your specific needs. So if that is something that you would like us to organize, of course, I believe Dr. Melanie, Moses, we can always be available to do that. I don't know whether there are any other burning questions that might be relevant to this particular conversation. If you have any, I can give about 5 minutes so that we are able to just unmute or raise your hand, and we'll unmute you for you to ask your specific question if it's still burning. Like, do we need an AED in our first aid box? Perhaps Moses just see how best to handle that as I prepare the registration link.
Dr. Melanie, please answer.
Yes, I have a question. If you can allow me, please.
Go ahead, as Dr. Melanie prepares to answer the previous question. Ed?
Yeah, MCOM, just requesting for those of us who had some network issues, maybe you'll be able to share the recording so that we can be able to follow up and get to know what has been discussed kindly. Thank you.
Right. I think that one will be handled by the IHLM team. And any other question? All right, Dr. Melanie, do we need an AED machine in our workplaces?
Thank you for that question. The AED, we did not put it as a requirement in the first aid box or the facilities. However, in the curriculum, we have put it as one of the things that is good to train the persons administering first aid on a use of AED. So that is what we've put. And I'll still go back to the same thing that I said. When you do a risk assessment, and this is one of the things that is required, please put it. This AED is already required in other, I know in other jurisdictions, they're a little bit more advanced in terms of their requirement of having AEDs in public places and not specifically the workplaces. In public places, for example, I know airports have them, I know several port areas, in other places, even the markets, if you go to the malls, they have it. Is this a requirement, a minimum for all workplaces? No. Is it a good thing to have and good to have more persons who are trained in AED use? Yes. And this is in keeping with other public health issues. For example, the emergence of non-communicable diseases. We are seeing more people collapsing because of heart attack issues, blood clots and whatnot. So it's a good requirement. It is not mandatory for now.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Any other question?
Yes, if I can go.
Question, Moses.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, could you please guide on how we can get the first aid manual, because it's not found in the DOSH portal?
First aid manual. I don't think we have any prescribed first aid manual, because what documents we have the curriculum, the code of practice, and the rules. I don't understand which first aid manual you're talking about.
Or rather, the guide, okay, the guide, the book, I mean, whatever that contains the guidelines, the guiding rules on first aid at the workplace.
I'll respond to that, Mr. Muthe. Let me check the other questions and respond.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I have a question, if I may go.
Yes, please.
Right, thank you and great presentation. My question goes straight to the first aid room. Do you have a specific list of equipment and supplies, what ought to be there? And who is to be responsible there in terms of their qualification? Who ought to man that first aid room? Thank you.
I see two other hands raised.
Thank you so much. We're just having a quick question based on matters documentation. Yeah? Are we going to get a certificate for this training? This question has also been asked in the chat box. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think, Kinyo, your hand is the only one still up. You may please go ahead.
I still have a question. And for instance, initially I used to have an antiseptic solution of 500 mLs, about thereabout. and it used to expire. So now, if I do have now the 3 liters, it's still going to be extra cost and expiration. Is there something, any other way, or if I do my risk assessment and then I note such a thing, am I permitted to maybe do still the 100 or the 200 mLs? I have to stick to the 3 liters per box because I'm working with a category of 10 to 50 workers? Thank you.
Thank you, Kenyan. I think you had asked this question before. I didn't respond. So I'll go past the booklet. When you look at this requirement of the booklet, it ideally should come with your first aid kit. It has really very quick basics of what someone is supposed to do. We will provide the updated version that we have. If you note, most of these documents that I've mentioned to you today are not yet on our website, like the code of practice, the first aid curriculum, we will avail that. But basically what this booklet has is what is in the regulation. It is what you expected to be trained in the curriculum. So that one we will avail. For the first aid room, is there a minimum requirements? If you go to section 10 of this regulation, it sets the minimum requirements, who needs to manage the qualifications, and then also the duration of when this first aid room should be operational. It also sets the minimum in terms of the equipment that needs to be there. So in this, we're looking at, it has listed a few more things over and above what is the minimal requirements of a first aid kit. So it gives you a bit more equipment. And the reason for this qualification is in keeping with, when you look at these high numbers, most of the time there is a higher consequence or there's a higher possibility of you dealing with a bit more emergency issues that may require a little bit more help over and above just a routinely trained first aider. So yes, those are prescribed in section 10 and section 11. Documentation for this training, I think we will consult with our colleagues in IHRM and then give feedback to you. All those who've asked about the presentation, yes, we will share this. The regulation is available online, but we'll also share this. If you check the legal notice number 79 of 2024 in the Kenya law, it is gazetted and it is available in PDF form, but we are also happy to share the same. And even as we conclude, I'm available to, not just myself, but our office DOSH is available to answer any other questions that will be relevant to this regulation or any that pertains to it.
I have a question, which I asked on the chat box but has not been addressed. Do you guys recognize the online trainings, first aid trainings that are conducted through the LMS, internal LMS? Or the training has
if I may take up that, when COVID came, we encouraged a lot of online trainings. But if you look at first aid itself, these are practical courses whereby you need to demonstrate to staff who are being trained on first aid on some things that I'm not comfortable will be done online. So we encourage first aid trainings to be physical trainings because these are practical courses.
Okay.
CPR is done. I'm sure it will come out well if you on OSH committee, yes, you can do because they are very true practical courses that are there. But trainings like first aid and fire, you may not get really much if you do an online training because probably a part of it may be done online. But when it comes to the practical bit, which is a bit, if you look at our curriculum, it's taking up quite a big some time. You may not practically be able to do that. And then I want to go back to what Dr. Marian had. In the old rules, the rules of 1977 were very explicit that there will be a first aid leaflet. For those who have interacted with that leaflet, of course, it became obsolete with time because a 1977 leaflet cannot really serve us today. That time, there was not even HIV, it was not there. So what the new rules have done, they have not explicitly said that we have a leaflet. But it is, you have given us food for thought, whether we can include that leaflet there, although the rules do not excluded the leaflets in the first aid box. Therefore, it's not a requirement to have the leaflet, but as a good practice, we will sit down with my team and see, can we do a summary of what was being done by the first aid leaflet of the rules of 1977. Thank you.
Okay, before I hand over back to Catherine, there's a question Mr. Kinyo had asked about the antiseptic solution. I would say do a risk assessment and look at what is reasonable for you to stock. For example, if you are in an office setup of 5 to 10 people, I really do not expect you to routinely keep a 3-liter antiseptic solution. So yes, please do your risk assessment, look at what is reasonable, practicable, but ensure that then it is present, that to be able to address the numbers and then also be able to be of use in case of an emergency. Thank you. I think that's it on my end. I do not see any other question to be addressed at this point. And if there's any that I have missed, we'll share the email that will be circulated to yourselves that you may send so that we can address them. And we're also happy to, come back and give another presentation or provide any other further clarity to yourselves so that you're able to comply with this regulation and any other regulation under OSHA. I will hand over back to you, Catherine.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Melanie and Moses, for taking us through that very informative session. And thank you, everyone, for keeping the chats very, very active, your questions. I believe it is because this is information you were hungry for, and it came at a very important time. So thank you so much for taking us through this that session, for sharing with us the knowledge and also enlightening us on the Act and the changes that have come to be. So now, for those of us who are asking for the presentation, the registration form, the attendance form that I've shared on the link is the same form I'm going to use to share the slides through your emails. As for the recording, this is being recorded, and I've shared the YouTube link where you can be able to access the same recording or the same session through the YouTube channel. And for those who are looking for asking about CPD points, I believe I will be able to get back to you with that in terms of whether it will earn you a CPD point as an IHRM member. The IHRM member section has been disabled, so whether you're a member or not, you can be able to now fill in the attendance form. I hope everybody can be able to do that, so that now I'm able to share this information and any other information that you've requested from the DOSH team to be shared with you. Kindly fill in the attendance form so that you're able to receive that. I don't know whether there's any other concern with regards to the attendance form and how you'll receive the recording or the presentation that has been shared this morning. If you have any challenges, then let me know. Otherwise, everything is available on YouTube as a recording, and I will share the presentation through the emails you put in the attendance form. So we are about 310. I expect perhaps we shall all be able to fill in the attendance form before we exit the call. But at the as we come to the end, I believe we are right in time to be able to conclude and say it has been a very informative session. We really appreciate your time being on this call. If there are any follow-up challenges, I'm also putting my email in this particular chat so that you can be able to send in an email if you want us to come and perhaps do a little more sensitization within your organization so that perhaps you can gain more insights on how best to handle your institution when it comes to the regulations. I've seen others are concerned about the penalties and all. So it is important that perhaps we have a more in-depth conversation with you and your organization. So my email is in the chat, catherine.mburu@ihrm.or.ke. those sharing their email addresses, kindly put them in the attendance form. The attendance form is where you will put in your email addresses so that I can be able to share this with you either on email or even on your WhatsApp. So if I have your number or your email, then I should be able to share that with you. Without further ado, I think we have come to the close of the session. I really appreciate each and every one of you and wish you another beautiful afternoon as we get into the afternoon session. So mine is just to say thank you so much, Dr. Melanie. Thank you so much, Moses, for creating the time. I'm sure the participants in here have appreciated it and they have stayed until the end. So it means it was very informative. So thank you so much, everybody. We hope that this has been very helpful, and we hope to hear from you with regards to any follow-up questions or concerns. Anything from you, Dr. Melanie, as we wind up, or Moses?
Yes, Catherine.
I think for me is
Go ahead, Moses.
I think for me it's just to say thank you for having us, and we are available in case you need any more presentations on the same. If there are issues we are not able to get into in depth, just liaise with us. It's very easy to do this for you. That's why we are here for this purpose. And our happiness is when regulations coming up, being implemented what they're supposed to do, because it's an improvement from what we have been having, and we will be happy to be part of the team that helping you understand these regulations. Thank you so much for me.
Thank you from myself and the rest of our team. Thank you to all the participants. I hope this presentation has been useful and has given you a snippet of what is expected. Our office is here to support you and help you with the compliance and not make it difficult for you. So if you have any questions, please reach out. If you have any suggestions, we are open to improving, and we are here to continue supporting your work. And we hope we'll come back again with more webinars to enlighten you on a few things that are happening in terms of the regulation and the policy framework. Thank you very much to the HRM team and all the HRM members. Over to you, Catherine.
All right, thank you so much. I believe we've come to the end. I've just edited the form now to include the email address. So if you're still on and still filling it, you can add your email address now to the form. My apologies. So that we can be able to share the information we've gathered today through your emails. So thank you, everybody. Feel free to leave after you filled in the attendance form, and we shall meet again. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Kate. Thank you so much. That's wonderful webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Onesimus. Pleasure to have you here. Anyone putting their email in the chat, let us put it in the attendance form as for now. Those leaving their email addresses on the chat, let's put them in the form, the registration form. It now has an option for the email address.